Summer's here, and it's time to enjoy the season. That means it's time to feed your yard with Scott's. It's easy to help your lawn stand up to summer's wear and tear, to keep it lush and green and help prevent those brown spots. It's time to get outside and enjoy every day. And Scott's has got you covered, because even though this summer may feel different, the best things never change. So let's get to it. It's time to enjoy your yard. Scott's. It's good out here.
The Chip Franklin Show with Chris Merrill filling in on KGO 810.
Hey, thanks for making KGO part of your afternoon. It is great to be in for my good friend Chip Franklin, who's super dynamite. You'll catch him filling in for Nikki in the mornings, and I've had the opportunity now to pop in and use his microphone for a little bit. But he makes me wear a mask when I do it. He's not really into sharing. To be fair, he made me do that long before COVID anyway. It's just the way it is. There is a chant going on when you see some of the protests happening around the country. There is a chant going on. Maybe you've seen it, the protests here too, from people who want to defund the police. They want to defund the police, defund the police. And now Minneapolis says, yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to defund the police. What? Minneapolis City Council actually said they're going to dismantle the city's police department. And I'm going to be perfectly frank with you. I don't know what that looks like. I really don't have any idea. Defunding, does that mean you're going to take away all the money? Dismantling, does that mean you're going to end the police department altogether? And without any sort of enforcement of the laws on the books, doesn't that become anarchy? Look, I know there's a lot of animosity about the authority that police officers show nowadays. I get that, right? I get that there's a lot of animosity toward that. And the good officers I know understand why that is, right? And the really great officers I know not only understand that, but they engage in community policing because they know that community policing is the best way to prevent crime. They know it, and they do it, right? And they do a great job of it. And then you see these rookies with these goofy mustaches that are out there with their batons, and they're happy to start shoving cameramen around or pepper spraying old men in these protests. We've seen those guys, right? Kind of the type A. Incidentally, I've been a type A guy my entire life, always very driven, that sort of thing. But I'd like to think I've been an empathetic type A guy. I try to think of other people throughout the process. So, but you know what I'm talking about, right? We know about these guys. It's like they have a gun, so they think they're invincible, that sort of thing. We know that, right? But the guys we really like, the guys and gals, I don't mean to disparage. The men and women that we like in uniform are the ones that have the gun and they know they have it if they need it. And it's there and they never, ever, ever want to pull it. Then you know that there's some guys that are like, I got a gun, I can't wait. You know that's happening. You know it is. Just natural personalities of people, and especially some people who want to be finding themselves in positions of authority. We know that happens. But does that mean that we get rid of police departments? That it doesn't sound quite right. Well, joining me right now is a guy who might know the answer to this. I sure hope he does. Richard C. Bell, Esquire. And Richard C. Bell specializes in police brutality and wrongful death cases. He's actually dealt with some civil rights cases himself, including police brutality. And some of these cases that if there were no cameras, there wouldn't have been any justice. So, Richard, it's good to have you on the program. Thank you so much for checking in with us today. Tell me here what this means if we say defund or disband the police departments in different cities as we know them. How does that look?
Sure, Chris. Thanks for inviting me, first of all. Here's the problem. We're using words like defunding, dismantling, disbanding. I think it's very misleading because we're not having this false choice between funding police or funding social services and education. That's not what we mean. What I think is meant is you need to have both the structural reforms in the police department to attack the systemic racism, and you need to have the social services programs. Now, when you use a word like dismantling or disbanding, this actually happened in Camden, New Jersey in 2012 and in Compton, California in 2000. And it's not that the police departments were taken away and you had chaos in the streets. No. What happened was, in both those cities, the policing became a county level matter. In Compton, it was the LA Sheriff's Department. In Camden, it was Camden County, because they felt that the police departments in the localities were so ingrained in a bad culture that they had to kind of start over again, except they had this county-wide police force. So that's what I think it means.
How does that work? Better or worse? I mean, how does that work, and does that necessarily fix systemic racism? In the opinion of many, they're saying, well, all you're doing is you're just replacing one bad apple with another bad apple. Not look, and obviously every situation is different, but how does the public receive that picture?
Sure. I think the public receives it like, look, we are breaking down what we have. We know that doesn't work. We're going to a different model, and in the different model, like in Camden and Compton, they're certainly not perfect, but they've certainly improved dramatically from where they were. We have a force that is now this countywide force, and we have many more safeguards in place, kind of like a number of the things that today that Justice in Policing Act that Congress has proposed. You have those kinds of safeguards in place on the state level in some regards, and there you are starting to change the police culture and the police standards.
So how does that? I've seen bad sheriffs, right? And we can probably name a few that the president has pardoned. So I know some bad sheriffs out there,
yes.
right? That have had issues with race in their history. Okay, so suppose you've got, I'm talking about Joe Arpaio, obviously, but let's use the Phoenix Police Department. Phoenix has seen a number of different protests. They've had some issues there. They've had people that are saying, this has got to stop. Black Lives Matter. There's reason for them to be upset. Arpaio's not the sheriff anymore. The sheriff that's in there is actually a pretty good guy. I know him, but if this were a situation where they say, well, let's dismantle this police department and let's turn it over to this other authority, I mean, again, you're not really turning it over to anybody that would be any better. You'd be changing things. There would be a change, but I don't know how that would be any better. So how does that improve accountability for the people? Does it just have to do with more people voting for a sheriff versus an appointed official on a city level? How does that really change the system?
You make a good point, Chris. So the point would be, you're not just turning it over to a new authority. You have to turn it over to a new authority that has these structural changes like Congress is looking at, and which state legislatures should look at and municipalities should look at. It's not enough just to turn it over to different people. I agree. You have to turn it over to different people with the kinds of reforms that the protesters are calling for, because there's a lot of excellent reforms that are being called for right now.
New York civil rights attorney Richard Bell, Esquire, is joining me right now, and you'll find more at richardcbellesquire.com. It's ESQ, richardcbellesq.com. And Richard, what are some of these reforms? If we can get into that a little bit more, what are some of the reforms that we'd be calling for if we're saying, look, we have to improve the system. The systemic racism has to change. We have to improve it. Here's where those improvements begin. What is the message that the protesters need to rally behind and say, here are our demands? This is what we want to see happen.
Sure. Banning chokeholds. Okay. You know how many police departments still have that? So that's a simple but extremely important one. How about we finally share data on police misconduct? You wouldn't believe what a poor system it is, certainly nationally, that the data is not shared when you've got a problematic officer and then he gets fired or he quits and he gets hired somewhere else, and there's no database to go to for the new people that hire him. That's really important.
A problem California. We just passed a law in California that improved that. It just went into effect here earlier this year. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. All right, what else? Okay.
How about this thing called qualified immunity? This is not to get in the weeds, but the Supreme Court basically has created a defense for policemen in cases brought by families of victims or the victims that basically set an extremely high bar in order to win a civil rights lawsuit. And one of the things Congress is looking at is getting rid of that. And if you did, you would make a more level playing field for these police brutality cases. And let's get real. When you hit the municipality in the pocketbook because they have bad actors on the police force, that is a great motivation incentive to change because it's very practical. It's like, wow, we can't pay any more money on this. We have some bad actors. We better police ourselves a little bit here. That's a
is
big
there
one.
a difference? Is there a difference, Richard? Is there a difference between police brutality and, say, police brutality involving civil rights violation, aside from the obvious civil rights violation of being brutalized by an officer? But in the same way that we've got hate crimes, is there a qualifier to police brutality?
Sure. What happens is it breaks down. So, for instance, the Floyd family would have a civil rights suit under federal law for the violation of his civil rights. It would be Fourth Amendment seizure and obviously his death by excessive force. And then it would be a wrongful death case regarding the assault, the battery, and the death, and that's a state case. So, yes, it's differentiated. It is.
All right. Richard C. Bell is with us right now. When we talk about defunding these different departments, and again, the word defunding or dismantling just seems, the words themselves seem extreme to me, because what I'm seeing from some different groups is that they're saying, wait a minute, we don't want to not have law enforcement. We don't want to not have somebody there to enforce the laws that are on the books for the betterment of all of us. But what they're saying is, do we need to spend so much money on, tactical gear when we could take some of that money and put it towards social programs or mental health programs or things of that nature? Is this something Congress is considering right now?
Yes, as a matter of fact, in the Justice and Policing Act, one of the things is the funding of federal funds going to these kind of militarizations of local police forces. That's a really good thing because we don't need that. What we need is police who are not just part of the community, but are felt to be people that are in service and doing our public safety. One of the things I always thought about was, why do we call them police officers and not call them public safety officers? Because if you did, just the tone of that, it's for the public, it's for our safety, and I think it just simply sends a message of an arm around your shoulder instead of a knee on your neck.
We have seen that in a few places, right? But for the most part, it's still the PD. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Interesting. Richard, pleasure having you on here as we talk about different legal reforms, and we'll invite callers in as well. Richard C. Bell, Esquire, RichardCBellESQ.com, civil rights attorney. Good having you on the program, sir.